One of the things that we have learned, about soil from an erosion standpoint, I mean, we've all learned it in NRCS, about ground cover and terraces, shortening slopes, and a lot of different things. One of the things, and we'd known about it, but we didn't really understand it completely, I don't think, was something that's called aggregate stability. And that is if you've got a ped-on or a clod, whichever you prefer to call it, is how stable it is in the presence of water. Do those soil particles adhere together? When it rains, where does the water go? Okay, you've got particles of soil out there, right? The soil has structure. When it rains, where does the water go? How does the water infiltrate? Does it go through the solids?
No.
Where does it go?
Between the cracks.
It goes through the pore spaces, doesn't it? So we want those pore spaces to remain intact, because they are crucial to the exchange of air, the infiltration of the water. So anything that we do that alters those pore spaces, whether it makes them smaller, whether it makes them fragile so that they collapse, anything that alters those pore spaces or affects them is going to impact our infiltration. It's also going to impact the exchange of air. And so one of the ways we can test that, and you can do this at home, is just to get you a jar. I mean, it can be a glass of water and some screen wire. It has to be pretty big screen wire. What we're going to do is we're going to see how water affects the stability of the soil, and what causes it to adhere to each other. What causes the particles of soil to adhere to each other? I've got two ped-ons here, one no-till, one from a tilled soil. I'm just going to set them in here, and then we're going to talk about what happens. And I hope you can see it on screen up there. So no-till, tilled. We're just going to see what happens. Okay.
Oops.
Make sure there's no loose ones on the sides, right? So, as the water begins to soak in to those ped-ons, what begins to happen? Okay, the force of the water as it soaks in, it begins to put pressure on those ped-ons, on that aggregate stability. So what is one of the things that creates that aggregate stability? Well, a few years ago, and you can see it's pretty dramatic, isn't it? A few years ago, some ARS scientists discovered a substance in the soil called glomalin. It's a secretion given off by a particular type of fungi that acts as a glue in the soil. So when you've got soil particles out there in the field, and this glue holds these soil particles together, so when it rains, the impact of the raindrop pounding on the soil, the impact of the water rushing across the field, those soil particles, if they've got glue so they can adhere to their neighbors, right, they can hold on, they're not going to erode. They're not going to wash away. They'll be less likely to, anyway. When we have a field that doesn't have as much of that substance in it, like this, what happens? All those soil particles become easily dislodged, become easily disrupted, and can easily erode and wash off the field. So, and you can see, even though we're getting some breaking down here on the no-till a little bit, what do you notice about the clarity of the water? Because even though those particles are breaking off, they're much bigger. So they are not as essentially water soluble. They're not going to break down, and the water quality is going to be much better. So what disrupts the fungi that makes this particular this glomalin? Well, fungi typically are a fairly long filamentous organism in the soil, and so anything that chops them or sizes them, anything that disrupts them is going to reduce their numbers. Now, are there still fungi in tilled soil? Yeah, but not as many as in an undisturbed soil. So then there's less glue. So we get this situation, okay? So imagine it rains, you know, and you just got all this little soil particles that break loose and can wash away. If they don't wash away, what happens? You've got these soil particles, as the structure of the soil breaks down, they settle out and seal over at the surface, right? What's that sealing going to do to infiltration? It's going to reduce it, isn't it? So that's what we're going to look at real quick as we go through the rainfall simulator here. Is the impact of this right here, of this loss of aggregate stability on infiltration, okay? So, here we've got tilled soil. Here we've got tilled soil with a cover crop. Over here we've got no-till, long-term no-till, with an occasional rye crop, but essentially a corn and bean rotation with rye here or there. Okay, none this year, but essentially a corn and bean no-till rotation for probably 15 years. Here we have long-term no-till, 15 to 20 years of no-till, with a very diverse rotation. Corn, beans, sunflowers, wheat, rye, hairy vetch, and just a very diverse situation. Again, not an active cover crop this year, but a very diverse rotation. Okay, so we're gonna make it rain, and then we're gonna capture. And I want to dump this one more time. So the middle one, we're just gonna capture the full amount of water. We have electricity and water, and that makes me squeamish. I don't know about you guys. If I stand here and start shaking, somebody come up and hit me and knock me out. Okay? Yeah, right. After a while. After a while. So this one right here, you know, I dug this soil last week and it was frozen, obviously, but I wanted to simulate a tilled field, right? So it is very loose. You know, I grew up and it's just like a tilled field, right? Very, very loose. You know, I grew up in North Missouri, you know, and I was taught, you know, we wanted a good, loose, friable seed bed before we planted, right? Man, we had to get good, loose soil to get seed-to-soil contact. And you know, so I grew up on it. It seemed like I spent my whole youth on an 1850 Oliver dragging a disc around, right? Any Oliver? You got any Oliver guys out there? They're getting farther in between, aren't they? So we're going to make it rain here for a minute, and I'm going to kind of talk about what we see. Again, tilled soil with a cover crop, and the cover crop rows are actually running across it, and then two no-till, diverse no-till, and a simpler no-till, and then a diverse no-till. Okay.
Typical Missouri no rain.
Just like last summer. It's not going to rain, is it? It's turned on.
There we go.
Are we getting everywhere? Yeah. So, Alan said if we got on the carpet, he was buying the carpet. So we're just going to watch it rain for a minute. How's it doing? So, you know, again, our aggregate stability, you know, is something that we really never, I don't know, you know, as an NRCS employee for a long time, it's just something that we didn't really take into consideration, you know. So when we were talking erosion, what were the things that we looked at from an erosion standpoint? You know, soil type, obviously. How about slope length? How about slope length? What's the primary purpose of a terrace? To shorten slope length, right? So how long of a slope length do you think we have right here? The terraces are on 120 foot, right? You got about 18 inches here, so we shouldn't have any problem, right? What's it doing, guys?
And we're getting a little
I'll hold up the jar so everybody can see it after it rains a little bit. What? How much rain? Oh, couple tenths so far. We'll let it rain a little bit more. The limit of the rain is how much we get before it goes over the 2x4s under the plastic. That's how much it's going to rain. So again, as you watch that, you know. Think about your fields. Think about, you know, and we've always worried about cover. You know, that's what NRCS has preached, isn't it? It's cover. And don't get me wrong, cover is really important. It is. You know, this one right here with the cover crop on it. That's a tilled soil with cover, and I'm going to say it's. I don't know. It's probably 70% cover, maybe, which is pretty good. Plus, it has a living root. I promise we won't get the carpet wet.
worried.
I'm pretty much taking a shower.
You know, so we've really preached cover, haven't we? You know, as long as you got ground cover, that's all that's important. But we're really beginning to understand the impact of this aggregate stability, which really only comes from no disturbance, allowing the soil to reach, you know, a stable point. So that's where the cover crops, you know, the hot topic really is cover crops, isn't it? The cover crops are the hottest thing going. How many of you came to hear about cover crops? How many of you came to hear about no-till? Okay, we got a couple hands. Very good. So they are very much go hand in hand. You know, the cover crops are a really cool thing. They are. But I'm here to tell you, without the no-till, they're not going to be near as good. And I mean, you can see that a little bit. I think, in the interest of, yeah, I know, my water's starting to get deep. Should have had that guy that wants to take a shower. Yeah, Randy, we're going to do that off. Good job. Turn that off, Randy. So if we take a look at these, okay? We've got our no-till, our two no-tills. This is the runoff off of our two no-tills. Okay. This one we got a little extra there. I did a little loosening around the edges, so that probably is part of that. But again, the two no-tills. Virtually, and we just rained about 6 or 7 tenths. Okay. Half an inch maybe. Yeah, 6 tenths or so. So, we got virtually no runoff from this, did we? Again, think about that aggregate stability, because those pore spaces remained intact. You that water began to rush in, we didn't have much disturbance. Look at our infiltration. Okay? Again, the pore spaces is where the water goes. The water does not go through solid. Think about this. Think about on highway construction. How do they increase compaction whenever they're laying a new base for a road?
Use a disc.
They use a disc, don't they? Because it sizes the material. And so when we're tilling a field, we're essentially sizing and breaking down that aggregate structure. Even if we're not getting compaction from the vehicle, I'm not saying that, simply because we're chopping and sizing those aggregates, we're going to impact that pore space. We're going to impact that aggregate stability in the long term. You know, does it happen in 1 year? No. You know, and that's why it lulls us. It lulls us into, you know, when you've got the last 4 or 5 years, we've had, you know, well over 1 million acres of grass in this state converted from grass to crop. And you know, the first couple of years you see that, and you go in and you break that up and you till it, and it's got good aggregate stability because it takes time to degrade that soil. So the first 2 or 3 years of tillage, you don't really notice any erosion to speak of, and you think, well, it's not so bad. You know, this field must just not lay very bad, right? But then after 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, that aggregate stability's gone. The glomalin, the glues are being degraded and are reduced over time. And 4 or 5 years down the road, you get a big rain, and what happens? It's gone, isn't it? So, you know, it's something that lulls us, you know, into that false sense of security that, well, it's not so bad, but it does happen. Here's our runoff from tilled. And it did make a difference. You know, the cover crop did make a difference, but not always does it come out that way. This one did pretty good. Okay, this one did pretty good. So the combination of the no-till and the cover crops is the critical thing. You know, this is runoff, right? This is runoff. How, you know, can we afford? And that was a half-inch rain. Can we afford to lose, you know, that much water when we get a half-inch rain? Yeah, okay, it rained pretty hard, you know. That was a half-inch rain in about 5 or 6 minutes. I don't know what it was. But, you know, do we only get nice, easy rains in Missouri? Maybe down here in North Missouri where I live, they don't always come in little half-inch showers, do they? So infiltration. We create our own droughts. We really do. We create our own droughts. I'll do a little digging maybe, and we'll see how. So how deep do you think the moisture went in the... We got dry soil at the bottom. Dry soil on the bottom. So how much of that water did we really capture? You know? It's the combination of the cover crops, of ground cover, and the combination of that aggregate stability. The combination right here. Think about it from a water quality standpoint. From a water quality standpoint, you know, even if you don't think about the loss of soil, think about the water. Okay? Questions? Sir?